Robb Stark's final memory before all went black was of the hall at the twins awash in blood. He had felt each slash and stab as though the steel found not his flesh but his pride and dreams, cutting them down one by one. Caitlyn's screams still reverberated in his head, merging with the pounding of his heart as it slowed to a halt. He had thought of Grey Wind, his loyal direwolf, caged and helpless. He had thought of his sisters scattered to winds unknown, and his brother Bran, his little Rickon, and Jon, though the latter was only half a brother in name. In Robb's heart he had been as dear as any Stark. Then the world had narrowed to nothing, and Robb Stark, the king in the north, died. He did not expect to wake in blackness. His first awareness was of the pain. Not of the knives or arrows. He could no longer tell how many times he'd been struck, but something deeper and stranger. It was a searing ache in the marrow of his bones, as if his body were being heated from the inside out. His eyes refused to open. An acrid smell choked his nostrils, reminiscent of char and brimstone, yet there was an undercurrent of something alive, like newly tilled earth after a cleansing rain. He had no sense of place or time. For a moment, in that dark and nameless eternity, Robb thought himself locked in some cruel afterlife, a domain of endless agony reserved for oathbreakers and the betrayed. But there was a pulse that kept him tethered. He heard it not in his ears but in the very center of his skull, a dull, resonant drumbeat. He was still in this world, somehow. Or he was in a place between life and death, with only pain and that faint, rhythmic pounding to anchor him. Slowly, painfully, he forced his eyelids apart. A sharp light lanced his vision. He blinked to adjust. It was not the sun. It was a flaming torch, or perhaps something greater, a thick brand thrust into the ground, giving off an orange glow. Except it was no torch at all, he realized. The light was coming from something curled around him, an immense shape that breathed in and out, each exhalation a swirl of heat. It was a dragon. A midnight-scaled beast with molten eyes, narrower than he would have imagined but blazing with an otherworldly spark. Robb gasped, or tried to, only to find his lungs shuddering in protest. The creature's head turned, revealing a dark crest that looked like folded wings upon its skull, and it regarded Robb with a gaze so intense that it pinned him in place. He did not know how he was alive, nor why he was here. All he sensed was the presence of this ancient, primal power and the knowledge that he was, impossibly, breathing. He tried to move his hand. The flesh was stiff, bound in some kind of cloth. When he lifted his arm, the cloth slid away, revealing the pale, puckered scars of what had once been mortal wounds. He felt neither fresh scabs nor half-stitched flesh. Everything was sealed up as if he had lain in the ground for weeks, months, or years. Slowly, he began to take in the space around him. A chamber of stone walls with jagged edges. This was no feasting hall. The only furnishings were broken shards of rock and bones strewn about the corners. He saw what looked like a man's skull, bleached white, set in a brittle heap. A chill danced along his spine despite the heat radiating from the dragon's body. When at last the dragon stirred, its breath rumbled around them both like distant thunder. Robb expected to feel fear. How could he not? But beneath that initial surge of panic, there was an overwhelming sense of relief, of wonder. He was alive, or something close to it. The beast's nostrils flared, and Robb felt a hot gust of air wash over his face. His throat, parched and raw, forced him to cough. A small, rasping sound, but proof that his lungs were working once more. He swallowed, tasting ash and the faint tang of blood. When he tried to speak, only a croak emerged. The dragon blinked, its reptilian eyelids sliding shut and opened slowly. Then it turned and lumbered toward a break in the stone, a wide opening that Robb had not noticed. From beyond came a faint glow of daylight. Robb's mind raced, trying to piece together how this was possible. He remembered the red wedding, the betrayal, the crossbow bolts. He remembered his mother's hair turning white with grief in that final moment. Then nothing. His last coherent image was the point of a knife at his throat and the wet sound of blood. Now he was here in a cavern with a dragon. It seemed ludicrous, something fit for old songs or the ravings of a mad prophet. He struggled to his feet, swaying as pain lanced through his limbs. But his body held. He was whole, battered yet not broken. His clothes were in tatters, soaked in dark stains that could only be his own blood. And yet, somehow he was on his feet. He followed the dragon, every step tentative, each footfall a test. Stale air met him as he emerged through the opening. The stony corridor gave way to a ledge overlooking a rocky valley. Dawn's light touched the rim of jagged mountains. It was a desolate place, with sparse vegetation and pillars of black stone that jutted from the earth like ancient spears. The dragon perched on the ledge, tail coiled around its body, and let out a low, vibrating rumble. Far below, a great plain spread out, dotted with patches of grass and the occasional stand of twisted trees. Robb felt a stirring in his heart, a surge of something like courage. Only the north had truly been home. But in that moment, with the wind cold against his face and the dragon's heat at his back, he felt the flicker of hope. The world had not ended. He had not perished forever. The Starks endured. Was that not their motto, in spirit if not in words? He did not know how long he stood there, marveling at his predicament. The dragon shifted, nudging him. Robb almost lost his balance, but he placed a hand upon the creature's flank to steady himself. Its scales were hard as iron, but warmth radiated through them. Oddly, he felt no menace. He might as well have been gray wind for all the sense of kinship that washed through him. He thought of his direwolf's golden eyes, remembered the bond they shared, an unspoken understanding that came from beyond words. With this dragon, he felt a strange echo of that same connection. Could it be that in the moment of his death, as his blood pooled on cold stone, some divine or arcane force had taken pity on him? He had heard tales of Melisandre's god, Lawler, the Lord of Light, who had the power to restore life to the fallen, though at a price. Was this the same power that had brought Jon back from the cold of death? If so, how in the Seven Kingdoms had a dragon come to be part of that miracle? He realized suddenly that he was starving. His stomach clenched and every muscle in his body felt taut, like a bowstring. Whatever miracle had returned him to life had not granted him sustenance. He needed to eat, drink, rest. But he had no time for such luxuries if he was indeed living in a stolen hour. He looked at the dragon, at the ridges of black scale that caught the morning light. Perhaps it understood. The creature turned its head, gazed at him again, and let out a sharp bark that echoed off the canyon walls. Then, with a great thrashing of its wings, it leapt from the ledge, circling once overhead before diving beyond Robb's line of sight. Robb watched it vanish with mingled awe and sorrow, as if a piece of himself had just flown away. He realized how alone he was, how vulnerable, reborn in a world that had killed him once already. Yet this time he had no army at his back, no mother, no bannermen, not even the comfort of his direwolf. He put a hand to his chest, feeling the faint thrum of his heart. It beat, yes, but different, slower and heavier, as though the blood that coursed through him was thickened by whatever sorcery had resurrected him. Or perhaps it was merely the shock of living again. He decided he had to move. Standing idle would accomplish nothing. He picked his way down the path that led from the cave entrance to the valley floor. It was treacherous, strewn with loose stones and edged by sheer drops. Several times his footing nearly gave way, but he managed to catch himself. The sun climbed higher and sweat trickled down his neck, mixing with dried blood on his collar. By the time he reached the bottom, his legs ached and his head throbbed with thirst. Still, he pressed on, searching for any sign of water or shelter. He walked for what felt like hours. The valley revealed little but harsh terrain, scrub brush, rocky outcroppings, and the occasional bleached carcass of some unfortunate animal. Once he spotted a slender stream, more a trickle than a flow, but it was enough for him to cup water into his hands and drink greedily. The water tasted of minerals and grit, but it soothed the dryness in his throat. When he finally looked up, a hint of green drew his attention. A small grove of trees stood beyond a bend in the rocks. Without hesitation, he headed for it, hoping to find shade, maybe fruit if the gods were kind. As he approached the trees, he found them stunted and twisted, with bark as dark as charcoal. Yet among the gnarled branches grew clusters of pale fruit, the size of plums. Robb's caution warred with his hunger, but desperation won. He plucked one of the fruits, testing its firmness. The skin yielded slightly under his thumb. He took a careful bite, bracing himself for bitterness or poison. Instead, the taste was tart, with just enough sweetness to make his mouth water. He devoured another, then another until his stomach cramped. Only then did he stop, sitting at the base of a trunk to catch his breath. He slept, or perhaps he passed out. Time slipped away, and he was visited by dreams both glorious and horrifying. Flashes of gray wind racing across a moonlit field, of his father's face set in stern disapproval, of the dead rising from a banquet table, crossbows aimed at his heart. He dreamt of a great red comet streaking across the sky, lighting the world with fire that consumed cities and crowned mountains with flames. In one half-remembered vision, he stood in an endless void, hearing distant roars that shook him to his bones. When he woke, the sun was lower in the sky, painting everything in red and gold. He was stiff and disoriented, but alive, and that fact alone was astonishing enough to stir him to action again. He had to find answers, but where to begin? The Vale? The Riverlands? Had the Freys consolidated their hold after slaughtering his men? Or had the Lannisters grown stronger? Perhaps the Targaryen girl with her dragons had crossed the narrow sea by now. Jon might be leading the Night's Watch still, or fighting a war of his own. And what of the North? Winterfell had been burned, he recalled with bitterness, but maybe the Northmen still resisted under some banner. He had no illusions that things remained the same. The world he had known was likely altered beyond measure, but if there was any chance he could reclaim what was lost, or at least protect his surviving kin, he would take it. He was Robb Stark, king in the North, once at least. The name still mattered. With weary resolve, he pressed on, moving north by the angle of the sun. The land changed subtly as he traveled. The black stone pillars gave way to rolling hills, dotted with clusters of grass and thorny shrubs. He hunted small game when he could. Catching a hare with his bare hands was an impossible feat for a lesser man, but he found his reflexes sharper than they used to be, as if the beast sensed some predatory aura around him and froze. He felt guilt at the kill, reminiscent of a time he had let grey wind bring down a stag. But survival demanded harsh measures, and he needed protein and sinew to fuel his battered body. Days passed, or perhaps weeks. He skirted what looked like abandoned villages, never venturing too close. Something in his gut warned him that any contact with strangers could be dangerous. News of a risen king in the north might be more terrifying than inspiring to many, especially if the Freys or their allies had hammered in the notion that House Stark was finished. He would not risk betrayal or recapture until he better understood the lay of the land. At night, he stared at the sky, searching for the familiar patterns of stars that once guided him in the north. The nights felt colder now, and sometimes he caught himself shivering violently. Yet his mind drifted back to the dragon. Where had the beast gone? Why had it been there in that cave, apparently standing guard over his body? Every question led to more questions, and all he had was speculation. Perhaps the dragon had brought him back. Or perhaps it had merely been drawn to the scent of something extraordinary, like a moth to a flame. Dragons were rumored to be tied to magic and prophecy. Maybe his revival was a side effect of some greater purpose. Uncertainty gnawed at him. Eventually, he noticed subtle signs of habitation. Well-worn paths, hoofprints in soft mud, a rusted horseshoe half-buried near a stream. He followed these breadcrumbs of civilization cautiously, wary of stumbling into the arms of hostile forces. One morning, he crested a ridge and saw a modest settlement below. A handful of low stone houses clustered around a wind-worn September smoke curled from a few chimneys. People moved about in the yard, leading goats or carrying bushels of hay. The sight of them stirred something in Robb. This was the first real evidence of normal life he had seen since his resurrection. Without fresh supplies or clothing, he would never make it far. He had to risk contact eventually. He waited until dusk, watching the villagers go about their routines. Then he descended carefully. He approached a lone shepherd near a paddock. The man was older, with a gray beard and deep lines etched into his brow by sun and worry. Robb called out softly from a distance, keeping his hands open and visible. The shepherd spun, startled. In the half-light, Robb must have looked half-dead indeed, with tattered clothes and scars. For a moment, the man gripped his crook as though it were a weapon, eyes wide in alarm. "Please," Robb rasped, his voice hardly more than a whisper after so long without true conversation. "I mean no harm. I'm a traveler, lost my way." The shepherd hesitated, gaze flicking to Robb's face. Are you hurt?" he asked, accent thick with the local dialect. Robb shook his head. "Not hurt anymore. Just cold, hungry, in need of a night's rest. I can pay or work for it." He had no coin, though. He was not sure why he made the offer except from habit. A Stark always repaid debts of hospitality, and though that was more a Lannister vow, the principle of northern honor ran deep. The shepherd glanced around as if expecting bandits or worse. "We have little enough ourselves," he said, "but we can spare some bread. If you mean us no trouble, you can sleep in the barn." Robb nodded, relief washing through him. "My thanks." That night, he slept on a pile of straw warmed by the body heat of goats in the adjacent stalls. It was no palace, but it felt like luxury compared to the hard ground and the nightmares of the open road. The shepherd's wife brought him a bowl of thin vegetable stew and a crust of bread. Robb devoured it. When she shyly asked his name, he hesitated. If he said Robb Stark, would it mean anything to her beyond the memory of a lost and defeated cause? Or would it invite danger? In the end, he spoke only half the truth. "My name is Robb," he said softly. She did not press further. In the morning, he rose early and helped mend a broken fence post. As he worked, he asked careful questions: who ruled these lands, how the war had ended, what news of the north. The shepherd answered, sometimes with pride, sometimes with exasperation, as many small folk did when recounting the doings of lords and kings. Robb learned that the Freys were despised across the Riverlands for their treachery at the Red Wedding, that the Lannisters had tried to hold the realm together but struggled as rumors of Winter's harsh approach spread fear. The name Bolton made Robb's blood run cold. Apparently, Roose Bolton had styled himself Warden of the North, though he was rumored to have lost favor with many northern lords. The shepherd knew little else, only that the Northmen were as quarrelsome as ever, and that rumors abounded of odd happenings beyond the wall, dead things walking, and armies of wights. There was mention too of Daenerys Targaryen landing in Westeros with dragons at her command, though the shepherd scoffed at that, calling it Southron folly. Robb kept silent, thinking of the black-scaled dragon that had hovered over him in that cave. If one Targaryen had come, there might indeed be more dragons loose in the world. He thanked the shepherd and his wife for their kindness and departed, heading north again with renewed determination. As he walked, he felt the stirring of an old fire in his chest. The war had not ended when he died, the pieces had merely shifted on the board. If the Boltons held the north, then the proud realm of the Starks was still in peril. He might be alone, armed with nothing but his bare hands and the tattered remnants of his clothes, but he was still of the blood of Winterfell. His father had taught him that a lone wolf dies, but the pack survives, yet here he was, seemingly the last adult Stark left to fight. Perhaps Sansa or Arya still lived, perhaps Bran and Rickon were safe in hiding, but he did not know. All he could do was move forward. He traveled by back roads and forest trails, avoiding main thoroughfares. Winter was creeping in. Each morning the frost was thicker on the grass. The nights grew longer, the wind more biting. He managed to acquire a threadbare cloak from a peddler in exchange for a day's labor hauling sacks of grain. It offered scant protection from the cold, but it was better than nothing. Slowly, painfully, he worked his way northward, aided by small acts of kindness and by his own determination. He encountered bandits once, a trio of desperate men who tried to rob him near a shallow ford. They expected an easy mark. Robb proved otherwise. Though weakened by hunger, he fought with an animal ferocity that left them battered and bleeding. He took no lives, but the raw violence he unleashed shocked even himself. He recalled the flashes of rage that sometimes overcame him when gray wind was near, a primal connection he did not fully understand. Now, that feeling of savage clarity seemed to simmer just beneath his skin. When the bandits fled, he stood shaking, panting for breath, feeling at once furious and triumphant. He was not the same Robb Stark who had died at the Twins. There was something new, something draconic in his blood. At last, after weeks of grueling travel, he reached the neck. The swamps and bogs with their twisting causeways loomed ahead, a natural choke point that separated the north from the rest of Westeros. He spent days carefully navigating the perilous ground, each step testing the waterlogged earth. If word had spread that he was alive, heaven forbid, he could not risk open confrontation. The neck was no friend to invaders, but he doubted the Crannogmen or any other folk here would instinctively recall him as their rightful king. One evening, as a fine mist clung to the reeds, he saw torches in the distance. A half-ruined watchtower stood on a small rise, encircled by a crumbling low wall. Figures moved about, clad in mismatched leathers and carrying spears. Robb watched from concealment, Their speech was difficult to catch over the croak of frogs and the hum of night insects. But he discerned something about a traveler they had caught on the southern causeway. A name was mentioned, Rickon Stark. Robb nearly choked in surprise. Was that even possible? Driven by a sudden surge of hope, he crept closer, listening intently. He heard only fragments: young boy, fierce as a direwolf, small band heading north. His mind raced. Could Rickon truly be on the move? The last he had heard, Rickon was hidden away by Osha somewhere, but that had been vague rumor even in Robb's time. If Rickon was indeed alive, it changed everything. Robb's heart hammered. He needed to know more. His approach was too bold. One of the sentries spotted him, calling out in alarm. "Who goes there?" A spear was raised. Robb realized his mistake but did not retreat. He kept his hands visible and stepped forward, trying to appear non-threatening despite his ragged appearance. "I mean no harm," he said, hoping these were not Bolton men. "I heard you speak of Rickon Stark." A tense silence followed. Then one of the torchbearers moved closer, illuminating Robb's face. There was a collective intake of breath. Robb knew what they must see: a ghost of the late king in the north, pallid and scarred, his eyes burning with an unsettling intensity. He braced for them to cry out, to attack, or to flee in terror. Instead, a woman's voice, quavering with uncertainty, said, You're Stark. You look like him. Gods be good, could it be?" Robb swallowed. He saw the reflection of the torch flames dancing in her wide eyes. "My name is Robb Stark," he said, forcing calm into his tone. "I was told I died at the Twins. But I'm here. And I must find my brother if he is truly alive." He paused. "I'm no threat to you if you'll let me pass." Stillness. The men and women exchanged glances, unsure. Their leader, a lanky man with a patchy beard and a battered leather helm, lowered his spear. "I'll be damned if I know what witchery this is," he muttered. "But that face. It's him. In the north, we always said the Starks keep coming." He cleared his throat. "We're no friends of the Boltons. If you were truly Robb Stark, we'd not stop you from finding your kin. We heard rumor of a small party traveling west of the causeway. A boy with a direwolf, they said. Could be Rickon. Could be a wild child for all we know. But if you head that way come first light, you might catch their trail." Robb let out a breath he hadn't known he was holding. "Thank you." He noticed how they looked at him, a mixture of awe and dread. He recognized the risk. Some would call him an abomination, others might rally to him out of loyalty. But these folk had given him a chance, and he would remember that. He needed no escort, no further witness to his resurrection until he was sure of his next move. He asked them no more questions and did not linger. He withdrew into the fog, guided by desperation and the faint spark of belief that his youngest brother might yet live. He spent the next days following faint rumors, doubling back when the terrain forced him. The marshy wilderness yielded no easy path. But he pressed on, forging a route across broken causeways and hidden trails. Each step felt like a test of faith. Twice, he narrowly avoided Bolton patrols, men wearing flayed man sigils on their battered cuirasses, traveling in pairs or small companies. They searched the swamps, harassing locals, probably seeking the same rumor that had reached Robb's ears. The thought of Rickon hunted by such men fueled Robb's resolve. He evaded them, moving like a shadow through the reeds. His new reflexes, sharper since his resurrection, seemed to guide him around every corner, as though some internal compass pointed him along the safest path. One damp afternoon, under a sky pregnant with storm clouds, he caught sight of a figure slipping through the fens. It was a tall woman with feral grace, wearing rough leathers and carrying a short spear. A smaller form trotted behind her, barely visible in the gloom. When lightning flashed, Robb's heart lurched. The smaller figure was a direwolf, its fur dark and its eyes gleaming gold. He recalled Shaggy Dog, Rickon's companion, though that wolf had been known for a wild temper. Could it be them? He did not call out at once. Instead, he followed at a distance, mindful of his stealth. The pair traveled eastward, picking their way across mossy hummocks. Eventually, they reached a shallow, algae-choked pool. Robb, hidden behind a clump of tall reeds, watched the direwolf lap water while the woman stood guard, her eyes scanning the surroundings with suspicion. He wanted to step forward, to cry out his brother's name, but he saw no sign of Rickon, only the direwolf. That meant Rickon might be further ahead or hidden. He had to be sure. Suddenly, the direwolf's ears pricked. Shaggy Dog raised its head, letting out a low growl. The woman tensed, glancing in Robb's direction. She must have sensed something, for she hefted her spear. Robb realized he had mere moments before she struck. He rose slowly from the reeds, hands raised. "Wait," he said, voice echoing across the water. "I'm not your enemy." She whirled, eyes narrowed, spear poised to throw. Shaggy Dog snarled, taking a step forward. Robb's stomach flipped as the huge black wolf bared its teeth. So it was Shaggy Dog indeed. He could see the ghost of the pup that had once gambled around Winterfell. But that pup was grown now, muscular and ferocious. The woman hissed, "Who are you?" Slowly, Robb approached, mindful of each step. "My name is Robb Stark," he said, voice steady. "I've come looking for Rickon and Shaggy Dog." Her eyes went wide with astonishment, then fury. "Don't you lie," she spat, brandishing her spear. "Robb Stark is dead. Slaughtered at the Twins. I've no patience for your southern tricks." Robb's gaze flicked to Shaggy Dog, whose hackles were raised. The wolf sniffed the air, confusion apparent in its posture. "I am dead," Robb said quietly. "Or I was. But something brought me back, I swear on the old gods. I only want to find Rickon. Is he with you?" She did not relent. "Why should I believe you?" "Because," he said, taking another careful step, "Shaggy Dog was found with Rickon after the pup was discovered in the snow alongside 5 others by my siblings and me. He was named for his black fur and his wild temper." He kept his voice calm. "You must be Osha. You took him away when Winterfell fell. You swore to keep him safe." A flicker of recognition flashed in her eyes. "You speak truths only the boy's brother would know. But you still might be a Bolton trick." She jabbed the spear at the air. "I've come too far to trust easily." Robb exhaled. "I understand. But look at me. Look at my scars." He pulled aside the ragged cloak to reveal the marks on his chest, jagged, puckered lines that told of multiple stab wounds and arrow piercings. "I was murdered by the Freys and the Boltons. Yet here I stand. I cannot explain it fully. Jon Snow, my half-brother, you might know, was rumored to have been brought back by the Red Priests. Perhaps something similar happened to me. Maybe the gods took pity on House Stark. All I know is I'm breathing again." Osha stared, her knuckles white on the spear shaft. Then her gaze flicked to Shaggy Dog. The wolf sniffed the air again, then let out a low whine, uncertain. It took a cautious step forward, muzzle quivering. Robb held out a trembling hand. "It's all right, boy. Do you remember me?" Slowly, Shaggy Dog advanced, hackles lowering fractionally. When the wolf's nose touched Robb's fingertips, the spark of recognition passed between them like lightning in the sky overhead. Shaggy Dog made a throaty sound somewhere between a growl and a purr, half anger, half relief. Yet it did not attack. Osha's grip slackened, confusion plain on her face. Then, from behind a twisted cypress, a child's voice rang out. "Shaggy?" Robb's heart skipped. Rickon emerged, taller than Robb remembered, hair wild and unkempt, eyes fierce. Osha tried to stop him, but Rickon darted forward, pushing aside the branches. He stared at Robb. Silence stretched taut. Then Rickon's eyes shone with tears. "Robb?" His voice cracked, raw with disbelief. Robb fell to his knees, ignoring the mud that soaked into his breeches. "Rickon," he breathed. "Little brother." Shaggy Dog turned to Rickon, tail swishing nervously as if uncertain whether to keep a defensive stance. Rickon took a hesitant step, then another, until he was within arm's reach. He looked at Robb's face as if trying to see through the illusions of a dream. Then, with a wordless cry, Rickon flung himself forward, arms tight around Robb's neck. Robb pulled him close, tears burning his eyes. He held his brother as the storm clouds rumbled overhead, fat droplets of rain mingling with the salt of their tears. For a long while, no one spoke. The only sound was the patter of rain on leaves and the muffled sob that escaped Rickon's throat. Osha lowered her spear, exhaling a shaky breath. Shaggy Dog circled them, ears pricked, tail swaying uncertainly. Robb could feel Rickon's heartbeat against his chest, rapid and fragile like a trapped bird. He closed his eyes, overwhelmed by gratitude that at least one of his siblings was here, alive. The memory of the Red Wedding's horrors receded, replaced by the warmth of family. When Rickon finally pulled back, he looked up at his brother with a tumult of emotions contorting his young face, relief, fear, joy, anger. How are you here?" he asked in a small voice. "They said you were dead. They killed Mother too." Tears threatened again at the mention of Caitlin, and Robb pressed his lips into a grim line. "They did," he murmured. "But I'm here, Rickon. I can't explain the magic of it. Perhaps the old gods favored us. Perhaps there was some dragon sorcery involved. But I'm back for you. For a home. For the North." He placed a hand on Rickon's shoulder. "You've grown so much. I'm sorry I wasn't there for you." Rickon gave a fierce shake of his head. "I can still hardly believe it's you. But I can feel it." He took a breath. "Osha saved me when Theon took Winterfell. We've been hiding, moving from place to place. We tried to find the Umbers, but," his eyes flickered with sorrow. "Bad things happened." Robb knew well the tales of treachery that had racked the North. "We'll get through this," he promised, though how he did not know. They had no allies, no army, and the Boltons ruled with fear. But the North remembered. If rumors spread that Robb Stark had returned, some would rally, or so he prayed. Osha stood back, her expression still rife with uncertainty. What now, Stark? If you are who you say you are, what's your plan? We can't keep wandering like this. The boy deserves better. Robb rose, helping Rickon stand. The storm clouds parted slightly, letting a sliver of gray light fall across the bog. We gather who we can, Robb said, voice firm. If my bannermen still have any loyalty, they'll answer the call of a Stark. We take back the north from the Boltons. And we do it quickly before winter sets in fully. He felt a stirring inside, a pulse that matched the thunder in the distance. Did the dragon's fire still burn in his veins, ready to lend him strength? He did not know. But he felt more certain of his purpose than he had in all his traveling. Osha eyed him doubtfully. That's a tall order, boy. The Boltons have fear on their side. Robb set his jaw. Fear can be powerful, yes. But so can hope. He looked down at Rickon, seeing the child who had once toddled through the halls of Winterfell but now carried the burden of exile. And the North is not made of cowards. They rested that night in the relative shelter of a crumbling ruin, an old watchtower half-sunk in the bog. Osha started a small fire. As the flames flickered, Rickon fell asleep against Shaggy Dog's flank, exhaustion overtaking him. Robb and Osha spoke in low voices, discussing the shape of the Boltons' power. She told him what she knew, how Ramsay Bolton had terrorized the Dread Fort and how Roose had tried to hold Winterfell, or what was left of it, as his seat of power. But the Karstarks, the Mormonts, the Glovers, many northern houses remained uneasy under Bolton rule, rebellious even. They might be waiting for a Stark to rally behind. The main question was whether they would believe in Robb's return or simply see it as some monstrous hoax. There are rumors, Osha said quietly, that Jon Snow has also rallied forces in the north, that he was named king in the north after the Battle of the Bastards or some such. Hard to keep track of all the stories. Some say Sansa Stark helped him. Others say she's lost. Robb's breath caught. Jon, alive. And Sansa with him? Are they truly in Winterfell? Osha shrugged. So the tales say. But tales blow in the wind. Maybe it's all rumor. I've not been that far north in months. The swamps are safer for a small party, so I kept the boy hidden. She glanced at Rickon. I do what I can for him, but I'm no lady of a great house. Robb felt his heart pound. If Jon had reclaimed Winterfell, that was a miracle akin to his own resurrection. Could it be that the North truly was on the cusp of standing tall again, under a Stark banner? He had to find out. But a knot of doubt twisted in his stomach. Would Jon believe that Robb was truly alive? Would anyone? And what if the Boltons were not as defeated as rumor claimed? In the morning, they set out, determined to reach the edges of the swamp and find safer routes north. Shaggy Dog roamed ahead, sniffing for threats. The journey was arduous, the bog was treacherous, and overhead, a pale sun offered little warmth. Twice, they nearly lost their way. But day by day, they made progress, the land gradually shifting from wetlands to rolling plains with stunted pines dotting the horizon. A crisp wind cut through them, carrying the scent of frost. Winter was fast approaching. They encountered a pair of huntsmen one afternoon. They wore patched cloaks and carried longbows. Upon seeing the dire wolf, they reached for arrows. But Robb quickly interceded. When they learned who he claimed to be, they exchanged a look of astonishment. King Robb? One whispered, stepping back in awe. Robbery, confusion, and hope in their eyes. They told him that rumors had indeed trickled down of Jon Snow reclaiming Winterfell after defeating Ramsay Bolton. The huntsmen were loyal to House Glover, or had been, and they had come south seeking game for the meager winter stores. When Robb asked if House Glover would accept him, they hesitated. Lord Robert Glover bends the knee to your brother now, they said. Jon Snow is hailed as the king in the north by many. If you come seeking refuge, best announce yourself carefully. Folk might not know what to make of two kings. Robb nodded, torn by a swirl of emotions. He was proud of Jon, who had apparently defied every odd to stand as the North's champion. Yet it also stung to think that he, Robb, who was the first to be named king in the North, might be an unwelcome disruption. He thanked the huntsmen and made them swear to keep his presence quiet until he could confirm the truth for himself. They departed, leaving Robb, Rickon, and Osha alone again on the lonely road. As they journeyed on, Robb's apprehension grew. How could he simply ride into Winterfell's gates on foot, no less, as a ragged specter, and announce, I am the king in the north, returned from death? It sounded mad even to his own ears. Yet he had no other path but forward. Each step closer to Winterfell was a step closer to discovering the fate of his family. On the eve of crossing the last stretch before the castle lands, they hunkered down in a small copse of pine, sheltered from the biting wind. Snow had begun to fall lightly. Rickon huddled in their makeshift lean-to while Osha patrolled the perimeter. Robb stood at the edge of the trees, gazing northward, his heart in turmoil. The last time he had seen Winterfell, it was home. Now it might be something else entirely, a seat claimed by another. The notion that Jon might consider him an intruder was almost too painful to bear. Suddenly the night air shifted. He felt a warmth at his back, a wave of heat that did not belong in the winter breeze. Turning sharply, he saw movement in the sky. A dark shape cut across the moon, wings outstretched. A roar pierced the silence, sending flocks of startled birds into flight. The dragon. Robb's breath caught. For so long, he had wondered if the creature was only part of a half-remembered delirium in the cave. But there it was, silhouetted against the moon, gliding in a graceful arc. As he watched, the beast folded its wings and plummeted, landing in a swirl of snow and debris not far from their camp. Robb rushed toward it, half in awe, half in dread. Osha appeared, spear at the ready, and Rickon clung to Shaggy Dog's fur. The dragon unfurled its wings, black scales reflecting moonlight. Its eyes blazed like embers. As it exhaled, a plume of steam and sparks issued from its nostrils, illuminating the clearing in an eerie glow. Robb approached cautiously, a strange excitement pulsing in his veins. He did not understand the bond between him and this creature, only that it felt as if a piece of his soul resided within the dragon. Or perhaps the dragon's soul resided in him. Whatever had happened at his resurrection, it had linked them somehow. Rickon's eyes were wide as saucers. Gods, he breathed. Is that? Robb nodded, not taking his gaze off the beast. It found me, he murmured, or perhaps it had always been with him. The dragon let out a sound that was part roar, part rumble, like a greeting. Robb extended a hand, heart pounding. The creature lowered its massive head, letting him touch the scaled brow. He felt an intense heat, but it did not burn him. A sense of calm flooded him. The presence of the dragon was both fearsome and reassuring. This was no mindless beast. There was intelligence in its fiery eyes, a recognition that transcended language. Robb half expected it to speak in his mind, but it remained silent aside from its deep breathing. Osha kept her distance, whispering curses under her breath. Rickon edged closer, curiosity overpowering his fear. Shaggy Dog bristled, uncertain whether to attack or run. When Rickon reached out a trembling hand, Robb gently guided it to the dragon's scales. The boy gasped at the warmth and texture. The dragon turned its head slightly, regarding Rickon with what Robb almost dared to call gentleness. In that moment, with the moon overhead and the snow swirling, Robb felt a sense of destiny. Perhaps the dragons had returned to Westeros not only for Daenerys Targaryen, but also to fulfill some other prophecy, one that now entwined with House Stark. After a time, the dragon lifted its head, sniffing the air. It unfurled its wings with a rush of wind, stepping back. Robb sensed its restlessness. It wants me to follow, he said quietly, though he could not say how he knew. The beast rose to the sky in a spray of snow, circling once as if beckoning. Robb glanced at Osha and Rickon. We must reach Winterfell, but this dragon, it might guide us there safely, or it might have some purpose. Osha looked at him as though he were mad. You'd fly it, then? Can you even do that? You'll freeze in that sky. Rickon clutched Robb's arm. Don't leave me. The boy's voice trembled. Robb's heart twisted. I won't leave you behind, Rickon. We have to stick together. He stared at the dragon, which hovered overhead. Could it carry 2? 3? Perhaps not. And the notion of flying seemed insane. Yet he felt the dragon's call tugging at him like an invisible chain. For a moment, indecision paralyzed him. Then, abruptly, the dragon landed again, gentler this time. It lowered itself, almost flattening its body to the ground. Robb blinked. It was inviting him to climb on. He turned to Osha and Rickon, swallowing hard. I think it means for us to ride. Osha's jaw fell open. Aye, that's madness. But if you think it can help us reach the castle faster, maybe. Otherwise, the Bolton's patrols could catch us on foot. Robb nodded. We'll try. If it tries to shake us off, we'll pray to the old gods. Carefully, he helped Rickon onto the dragon's back, nestling him between 2 ridges of scale. Osha followed, eyes wide, knuckles white as she gripped Rickon. Robb climbed last, positioning himself at the front so he could at least pretend to guide the beast. When the dragon lurched upright, all 3 clung desperately to its ebony scales. Robb heard Rickon's terrified yelp, felt Osha tense behind him. Shaggy Dog let out a howl, left behind in the clearing. But the beast was too heavy to carry on a dragon's back. Robb closed his eyes for a heartbeat, torn by guilt at leaving Shaggy Dog. Then a wave of calm rolled over him again, as though the dragon's presence suffused his senses. The world tilted, and with a great heave, the dragon sprang into the air. Snow whipped past them, and the ground fell away at dizzying speed. Robb's heart thundered in his chest. They soared above the treetops, the frigid wind slicing through their clothes. Clouds rushed around them and the moon loomed close enough to touch. Osha let out a string of curses behind him while Rickon clutched Robb's waist in terror. But beneath that terror was a thrill like nothing Robb had ever experienced. They flew north, guided by instinct or perhaps guided by the dragon. Far below, the land stretched out in silvery moonlight, a patchwork of forests, rivers, and frozen plains. Robb spotted lights flickering like fireflies, tiny hamlets, or traveling bands. The wind roared in his ears, turning breath to vapor. The dragons seemed tireless, each wingbeat propelling them closer to their ancestral home. In the distance, the faint glow of dawn began to warm the sky, streaking it with pale pinks and blues. Robb felt tears freeze on his cheeks as he thought of his father, Ned Stark, who had once told him that the man who passes the sentence must swing the sword. The memory came unbidden as if to remind him of the burdens of leadership. Could he bear them again? As the sun rose, they caught sight of a great fortress on the horizon. Winterfell. Even from this distance, Robb recognized the distinctive towers and walls, partially rebuilt from the ruin. Smoke rose from chimneys. Life, it seemed, had returned to those cold halls. A swirl of emotion rose in his chest, relief, longing, fear. The dragon banked, descending in wide spirals. Alarm bells would surely ring at the sight of a dragon in the skies of the north. But if Jon truly held the castle, perhaps they would not be met with arrows. Or perhaps they would. Robb braced himself, praying they would not be struck from the sky. Sure enough, horns blared from Winterfell's walls as the dragon swooped lower. Archers rushed to the battlements, black cloaks flapping in the wind. Robb's stomach lurched. He could make out figures shouting, see the glint of steel tips. Yet the dragon roared, a thunderous challenge, circling once more above the courtyard. Robb spotted the stark dire wolf banner flying on the ramparts, though it was now entwined with something else he could not make out clearly, some sign of Jon's reign, perhaps. The gates below opened and a small host spilled out, forming a defensive line. At their head, Robb glimpsed a tall figure in black furs, a sword at his side, wind-ruffling dark curls. Jon. The dragon landed heavily in the open field outside the castle walls, sending a spray of snow up around them. Robb struggled to keep his footing as it crouched, allowing him, Rickon, and Osha to dismount. The archers kept bows trained on the beast, shouts echoing across the yard. The figure in black advanced cautiously, flanked by knights and wildlings alike, if Robb guessed right by the manner of dress. Jon's eyes were locked on the dragon, but when Robb stepped forward, throwing back his hood, Jon's gaze snapped to him. Time froze. For a heartbeat, neither brother moved. Robb saw the shock etched into Jon's features. Then Jon's brow furrowed in disbelief. Robb, he whispered, voice lost in the wind. That's impossible. Robb swallowed hard. He raised a hand, palm outward, as if in benediction. It's me, Jon, he said hoarsely. I swear it by the old gods. He took another step. The men around Jon hesitated, uncertain whether to block him. But Jon waved them off, eyes never leaving Robb's face. Robb, Jon repeated, louder this time, searching his brother's features for the truth. He looked older, worn by hardship and grief. A scar marred his left cheek and the solemn lines around his mouth spoke of heavy burdens. Behind him, Sansa emerged, clad in heavy furs, her hair vibrant copper. She gasped, one hand flying to her mouth. Rickon darted toward them, calling Sansa's name. Osha followed, half carrying Rickon, as the boy was nearly stumbling with urgency. Sansa saw him and let out a sob, arms outstretched. As they embraced, Robb's gaze remained fixed on Jon. They closed the distance between them. Robb's throat felt tight, words insufficient for the magnitude of the moment. Then, in an instant, Jon pulled him into a fierce hug. Robb clutched him back, feeling the raw emotion in his brother's trembling embrace. They held each other, the cold air swirling around them, the war cries of memory echoing in their minds. All that remained was this reunion, this astonishing twist of fate. When they finally parted, Jon's eyes were rimmed with moisture, his voice thick. How? We lost you. Robb managed a shaky smile. And yet I stand here, brother. He gestured at the dragon, which observed the scene with a wary intelligence, tail flicking. It's a long story, something involving Dragonfire and old magic. Perhaps Melisandre knows the truth. But I swear, I'm not a white or a shade. I am Robb Stark, come home to defend our family and our kingdom if you'll have me. Jon let out a breath that misted in the cold air. If I'll have you? His voice broke into a laugh tinged with tears. We thought we'd never see you again. You're my brother. You needn't ask. Sansa approached then, still clinging to Rickon. Her eyes were shining with tears. Robb, she whispered, voice trembling. She touched his face as though afraid he would vanish. How's this real? Robb kissed her brows softly, feeling a surge of love for his sister, battered by the world but unbroken. I don't know, he admitted. But I'll not question the miracle. Behind them, men and women had gathered in a loose circle, uncertain how to react to such a spectacle. A man returned from the dead, riding a dragon. Some knelt, others whispered prayers, a few regarded the dragon with unmasked terror. John, seeing the confusion, raised a hand for calm. Brothers, sisters, he called out, voice carrying, this is Robb Stark of Winterfell, my brother, once king in the north. He is returned to us by some grace of the gods. His voice wavered at the word returned, raw with emotion. A ripple went through the crowd. Some of the older soldiers, those who had fought under Robb, exchanged incredulous looks, tears shining in their eyes. One stepped forward, dropping to a knee in the snow. My lord, he said, voice shaking. Others followed, unsure whether to call him king or lord, but reverence in their posture. Robb's chest tightened. The weight of his old title pressed upon him, but he felt no rush to claim it again. The North already had a king, John. And Robb saw no reason to contest that. Let the realm see House Stark united, not torn by pride. He put a hand on John's shoulder and turned to the assembly. Please, he said, voice carrying over the hush. I am glad to be home. But I've come to stand by my brother, who has done more than I could have dreamed to restore Winterfell and protect the North. He looked at John, meeting his eyes. If the North hails you as king, then so do I. I will fight beside you, live beside you, and if need be, die beside you, though the gods have already given me one chance at that. A murmur rippled through the crowd, astonished and touched. John gave Robb a look of profound gratitude. We stand as one family, he declared, voice strong now. The Boltons are gone. The North stands free, though threats loom from beyond the wall and beyond these lands. We'll need every ally to face the long night. Welcome home, Robb. Applause broke out, hesitant at first, then growing in fervor. Sansa moved in to embrace Robb again, tears freezing on her lashes. Rickon clung to them both, his own tears finally melting into a rare smile. Osha stood behind them, smiling in relief, though she still threw wary glances at the dragon. The black-scaled beast lifted its head to the sky and let out a triumphant roar, a clarion call that echoed across the snowy plain and reverberated in the hearts of all who heard it. In that mighty cry, the winter air seemed to crackle with a promise of renewal. Robb felt its resonance through his bones. He was alive against all odds. The North was united under Jon Snow, the family was reunited, and a dragon had graced them with its power. Whatever else lay ahead, White Walkers, Lannisters, or the greater machinations of Daenerys Targaryen, Robb felt a fierce, burning hope welling up inside him. He turned to Jon, voice quiet, we have much to discuss, brother. So much has changed. Jon nodded, eyes filled with a complex mix of relief and worry. Aye, he said. We'll face it together. The Starks have weathered every winter. We'll weather this one, too. Robb looked out at the snowy fields, at the gray sky overhead. He thought of the darkness he had known, of the Dragonfire that had seared his soul, of the indescribable moment he had awakened from death. He thought of all he had lost and what he had regained in this moment. Though winter's cold breath swept across the land, he felt warmth in his heart, a warmth that came not just from the dragon's flame, but from a bond of family and the unyielding spirit of the North. It surged through him, a living testament that even in the cruelest winter, new life could bloom. And as he stood among his kin, the banners of House Stark fluttering in the icy wind, Robb Stark knew that his true story had only just begun. The wind howled in the courtyard as the castle gates swung shut behind them. Snow whirled under a pale sky, the clouds overhead bruised and thick as though brooding upon the secret miracle that had unfolded in Winterfell's fields. Robb Stark, newly returned from death, shivered beneath the patchwork cloak Osha had given him. Even so, he felt a warmth that had nothing to do with any fire. It was the warmth of home, stone walls that resonated with distant memories of simpler times, the smell of straw in the stables, the tang of cold metal on the battlements, and above all else, the presence of his family. He walked beside Jon Snow, their footfalls crunching over half-frozen mud. Ahead of them strode Sansa and Rickon, with Osha close by, the giant dire wolf Shaggy Dog padding warily behind. Servants and guards parted before the party, too startled by the sight of King Robb, once declared dead, to do more than stare and bow in confusion. Some scarcely concealed their awe at the black dragon that had circled overhead, now perched just beyond the gates. It waited like a sentinel, folding its dark wings neatly to its sides. Its presence caused no small amount of fear. The horses in the stables were skittish, snorting and kicking at their stalls. Dogs barked and whined, cowering. Yet the creature made no aggressive moves, content merely to observe. Jon led the way to the great hall, which was surprisingly crowded for so early in the day. Word spread swiftly in Winterfell. By the time they set foot inside, a hush had fallen over the lords, ladies, wildlings, and knights gathered about. Torches burned in sconces along the walls, illuminating faces etched with confusion and wonder. Robb spotted faces he recognized. Ser Davos Seaworth stood near the dais, dressed in plain wool and a tired expression, the onion sigil pinned to his chest. Tormund Giantsbane lingered at the edge of the hall, a giant of a man with a mane of red hair, eyeing Robb like one might a ghost. Others wore the crests of lesser northern houses. Here and there he saw men of the Vale, the falcon badge on their cloaks. Most had risen to their feet, all too stunned to speak. Sansa turned to Jon as if seeking direction on how to proceed. She looked regal in her furs, tall, composed, bearing the aura of a lady who had endured heartbreak and found new steel in her soul. Jon nodded and the group moved to the raised dais. There, the Starks formed a line of sorts, Jon at the center, Robb at his right, Sansa and Rickon to Jon's left, Osha just behind Rickon's shoulder. The hush deepened until one could almost hear the crackle of the torches. Jon stood forward. His voice, though quiet, filled the chamber. "My friends," he began. "My lords. Good people of the north." His eyes swept the hall, measuring the mood. "You know me as Jon Snow, though by the will of our people and the blood in my veins, I stand as the king in the north. But today I bring you a piece of impossible news. My brother, Robb Stark, once king in the north himself, has returned to us." A tremor rippled through the assembled crowd. Some exclaimed in shock. Others gaped, whispering, impossible, or sorcery, or miracle. Robb stepped forward, refusing to flinch beneath the weight of so many gazes. He could feel their awe, their disbelief, their latent fear. He swallowed, recalling how to project his voice as his father, Ned Stark, had once taught him. "It's true," he said, hearing the scratchiness in his own tone. "I was slain at the Twins, betrayed by those who should have been our allies. But some power, or the old gods, or dragon sorcery, perhaps all at once, gave me a second chance. I stand here now not to claim a throne that my brother has rightfully earned, but to pledge my sword and my life to him and to the defense of our home. The North has suffered too many wounds, endured too many betrayals. My hope is to heal and protect what remains." He paused, letting his words resonate. The hall was silent enough to hear the spit of torches. Then Ser Davos stepped forward, half-bowing. "Your Grace," he said in his gruff manner, addressing Jon, but his old eyes flicked toward Robb. "Or perhaps your Graces. I served as an advisor to King Stannis once, and I've seen my share of strange miracles. I've seen the dead walk again. If you say this man is Robb Stark, and if my eyes do not deceive me, then I'll believe my eyes." Tormund scratched his beard. "We wildlings saw dead men too, but they were cold and heartless, not come back with warm blood." He squinted at Robb. "You look like a man, sure enough. And if Jon Snow stands with you, I'll not gainsay it." An uneasy murmur spread through the gathering. Some northern lords stared at Robb's scars. Others looked back at the door, half expecting a new marvel to burst in. Sansa slipped a hand through Rickon's as if grounding him from the swirl of tensions. Slowly, the tension began to ease. One by one, the lords resumed their seats, though many remained watchful. Jon gestured to the trestle tables. "We must talk, break our fast, and determine the best way forward. The winter grows harsher every day, and word from beyond the wall is dire. The army of the dead marches south. We cannot remain divided." At that, Robb felt a chill that had nothing to do with the cold. He glanced at Sansa, reading confirmation in her solemn gaze. The threat of the White Walkers was no mere rumor. It was real. He had heard scraps of it on his journey north, but hearing it stated plainly by Jon made it all the more terrifying. The hall's mood shifted as though a collective shadow had passed over them. Some stared at the floor, remembering battles past. Others took on expressions of grim resolve. At Jon's prompting, servants rushed to bring bread, salt, and ale. A meal was assembled in haste, a modest spread of roasted turnips, boiled eggs, stale bread softened with broth. There was little time for feasting or pageantry. These were lean days, and the specter of winter hung heavy. The Starks found their seats at the high table, though the arrangement felt strange. Jon sat in the seat once occupied by Ned, Sansa at his right, Robb at his left, Rickon beside Sansa. For a moment, Robb's chest tightened, haunted by memories of a simpler time when he had been just a son of Winterfell, not a king or a resurrected man. He pictured his father at this table, calm and steady, and thought of his mother's determined smile. But that was all gone now, lost in betrayal and war. Jon began by recounting the events since Robb's death, the coming of Stannis Baratheon to the north, the battles fought around the wall, the forging of a fragile alliance with the Free Folk, the shocking murder of Jon by his own men, and his resurrection at the hands of Melisandre. Jon explained how he had abandoned the Night's Watch, gathered loyal northern houses with Sansa's help, and confronted Ramsay Bolton in what had been called the Battle of the Bastards. Winterfell had been reclaimed, though at great cost. Sansa elaborated on her flight from King's Landing, her torments under the Boltons, and her eventual reunion with Jon. She watched Robb's face carefully as she spoke, gauging his reaction. Rage burned in Robb's heart when he heard of her suffering, of Ramsay's cruelties. He clenched his fists under the table, but Sansa took a breath, placed a hand on his arm, and shook her head lightly as if to say, "That time is past. We have more to worry about now." It did not quell his anger entirely, but it reminded him to remain measured. Others chimed in with their own accounts. Lord Glover's regret for not rallying to Jon sooner, Lady Lyanna Mormont's legendary fervor in calling out cowards, the heartbreak House Mormont endured when Jorah was exiled. Tormund boasted of the wildlings' bravery and how they had bled to help Jon take Winterfell. Through it all, Robb felt a swirl of disbelief and a deep sense of remorse. He had not been here to aid them, to fight at their side. While they had been enduring the nightmares of the Boltons, he had been lying in the silent darkness of death. That reality weighed on him like a leaden cloak. Finally, the talk turned to the White Walkers, the real threat that loomed beyond petty politics. Jon's eyes were hard as he described the Night King and the Whites, the unstoppable nature of that undead horde, the memory of Hardhome, the futility of normal steel against them. Tormund, too, gave harrowing testimonies. Ser Davos recounted the times he had heard Melisandre speak of Azor Ahai and a promised prince who would stand against darkness. All of it seemed a half-mad tapestry of horror and prophecy, yet the sincerity in their voices could not be denied. Robb's mind reeled as he tried to absorb the enormity of it all. The betrayal at the Twins, his death, and his resurrection were overshadowed by the revelation that an inhuman army threatened to extinguish all life. Even the Lannisters or the Freys seemed trifling by comparison. When he finally spoke, the entire hall fell silent to hear the voice of the man who had once been their king. "I remember hearing old Nan's tales of the long night," Robb said, recalling winter evenings in the library tower when he was but a boy. "We never truly believed them, though. It was just a ghost story to frighten children. But now I see it was all real. The cold winds are rising again, and we face a darkness that none of us are prepared for. I will fight side by side with you for the North and for all the living." Jon inclined his head in gratitude, though a flicker of unease passed over his face. "We need allies, Robb," he said plainly. "The living must unite, or we all die. You arrived on a dragon, and that alone," he trailed off, glancing down the hall to where some of the men from the Vale still gawked at the presence of such a beast. "We also have word that Daenerys Targaryen has landed in Westeros with her own dragons. If we are to convince her to join our cause, having one of our own, or at least one allied to us, might be a boon. But how did this dragon come to bond with you?" "That," Robb admitted, "I do not fully understand. It was there when I awoke. Its fire played some part in my resurrection, I suspect. When I traveled south from the mountains, I'm still not certain where I truly was. I felt it watching over me. Sometimes it disappeared for days, then returned as if drawn by some invisible tether. I can't speak to its mind, but I know we are connected. When I first laid eyes on it, I felt a pull, a sense of kinship I can hardly describe." Sansa listened intently, eyes wide with curiosity. "Could it be that your spirit was bound to it somehow? That its flame replaced your lifeblood?" The notion sounded like a rumor from across the narrow sea, but then again, everything about this was impossibility come to life. Robb exhaled. "Perhaps. I only know that it obeyed me when I needed it most. If Daenerys Targaryen indeed has dragons, maybe she would have answers. Maybe she's the only one who does." He glanced at Jon. "You said you have news of her? Has she reached the mainland?" Jon ran a hand through his dark curls. "Aye, some of her forces landed in the south. Word is she took Dragonstone. There are also tales that she's forging alliances with some of the great houses, House Tyrell, or what's left of it after the Lannisters' wars. Possibly Dorne. It's said that she wants the Iron Throne to claim what her father lost." Ser Davos cleared his throat. "We can't fight two wars. The living must unite, as you said, Your Grace. We need Targaryen support. The question is how to gain it. The Dragon Queen might be open to talk, but she's untested in these lands. And the Lannisters are still powerful." Tormund snorted. "Let the southern kings and queens squabble. The cold's coming, and it doesn't care who's on the throne. Let them see sense or die." Sansa folded her hands, posture poised. We should send a delegation, perhaps? Jon, you were considering going yourself, yes? She looked at him with a concern that betrayed deeper feelings. She did not like the idea of him traveling so far. Jon nodded reluctantly. I was. Because if the Targaryen queen is as rumored, she might not respect an envoy. She might only respect a king's word delivered by the king himself. Robb regarded him carefully. If you go, you'll need to leave someone here in the north to hold the peace, keep the houses united. Sansa can do much, but she shouldn't stand alone. He paused, feeling the subtle shift of eyes upon him. I can stay and help guard the north, he offered. After all, I've only just arrived. I should reacquaint myself with our people. If they see me not as a ghostly rumor but living and breathing, it might bolster morale. Or it might sow confusion, but if we handle it wisely, we can harness their faith. Jon studied him. The tension of leadership etched lines in Jon's brow. Aye, that might be for the best. Sansa holds Winterfell, but your presence would give the lords a sense of stability. Some of them followed you into war before. They might do so again, more willingly than they followed me. He looked almost apologetic. But I warn you, the north has changed. Some houses bent to the Boltons or lost their heirs to the Freys. There's bitterness, suspicion. Even though I'm accepted as king in the north, the wounds run deep. A small, lopsided smile touched Robb's lips. I learned a thing or two about forging alliances under strain. Let me handle them. Once you secure Daenerys's ear, we'll see about uniting the realm, if that's even possible. The threat beyond the wall does not discriminate among kings. They spoke late into the night, fleshing out details of this plan. As the torches burned low, the guests and lords drifted away to find rest, minds buzzing with the day's revelations. Eventually, the great hall emptied, leaving only a handful behind: Jon, Robb, Sansa, Rickon, Osha, and a few silent guards. The siblings embraced once more before dispersing to their chambers. Rickon lingered with Osha at his side, still gazing at Robb as though afraid he would vanish if he looked away too long. As Robb walked through the winding corridors, he felt a surreal sense of recognition. The scars on the walls from the sack of Winterfell, the half-rebuilt sections, the soot still staining some stones, these were new, and yet the ghosts of older memories whispered from beneath them. He passed a courtyard where, once, he and Jon had trained at swordplay. He paused at a window, recalling how Bran used to climb the towers despite their mother's admonitions. A pang struck him at Bran's memory. Was his little brother truly gone, devoured by the chaos of war? Jon's stories had suggested otherwise. There were rumors that Bran Stark was beyond the wall, touched by visions. But the details were maddeningly vague. Perhaps if the old gods willed, they might all be reunited one day. He found the bedchamber that Sansa directed him to, a small but comfortable room with new rushes strewn on the floor and a simple wooden bed draped in furs. A single candle burned on the bedside table. He sank onto the edge of the bed, exhaling. The silence pressed in, his thoughts churning. He stared at his hands, remembering how they had once been covered in blood at the twins. Did they bear any stain from that betrayal, or had the Dragonfire somehow cleansed them? He flexed his fingers, feeling the odd tingle that he often sensed since his resurrection. It was as if a small ember still smoldered beneath his skin. Sleep did not come easily. When it finally did, it was haunted by half-lucid dreams of flying over a frozen landscape, of seeing an endless tide of corpses surging southward. In the dream, his dragon roared, unleashing flames that turned snow to steam, but the horde kept advancing, unrelenting. Robb awoke drenched in sweat, heart pounding. The candle guttered out. Dawn's light leaked through the cracks of the shuttered window. He rose, splashed cold water on his face from a basin, and dressed in fresh clothes that had been laid out for him. A sense of purpose flared in his chest. Now that he was here, he had no intention of allowing the north to fall again. He made his way to the courtyard, where early risers went about their tasks. Guard patrols changing shift, stable hands feeding restless horses, a few small folk trudging through the snow with baskets. The air was bracing, carrying the scent of pine and distant cooking fires. He found Rickon near the kennels, accompanied by Osha. Shaggy Dog paced restlessly. Rickon brightened upon seeing his older brother. They traded a few words of greeting, and Robb ruffled Rickon's tangled hair. I want to help, Rickon said, determination gleaming in his eyes. I'm not a little boy anymore. I can see that, Robb murmured. You've grown stronger, braver than I remember. But help comes in many forms. We'll need every bit of it to face what's coming. Rickon scowled. I can fight too. Shaggy and I fought off men in the swamps. Osha knows. Osha snorted. Fought them off is stretching it. We ran or hid more often than not. But he's got grit, this one. Robb rested a hand on Rickon's shoulder. I won't dismiss your courage. You'll learn, but do it safely. There's time for you to master the sword, or the bow, or whichever suits you best. And we'll need you strong when the battle truly comes. Rickon accepted that with a reluctant nod. Osha looked relieved, as if she feared the day Rickon might race headlong into a fight beyond his skill. Robb glanced around at the snow-laden courtyard, feeling the day's chill seep through his cloak. Where's John? Likely in the Great Hall, Osha replied. He's meeting with his advisors, if I heard right. Robb went to find John. As he entered, he discovered that several of the northern lords had already assembled. Lady Lyanna Mormont, tall in spirit if not in stature, wearing her house's sigil with pride. Lord Wyman Manderley, who, despite his girth, managed a sober expression. Lord Glover, still looking as though he bore the weight of remorse. Ser Davos stood by John's side, murmuring in low tones. Tormund leaned against a pillar, arms folded, occasionally throwing in a gruff remark. Conversation halted as Robb approached. Lady Mormont's sharp eyes flickered over him. So it's true, then, she said in that fierce, childlike voice. You have come back from the grave? Robb inclined his head. Apparently so. She did not waver. If you were Robb Stark, then you once ruled us as the king in the north. Now we follow Jon Snow. Are we to have two kings pulling us in different directions? Not at all, Robb said calmly. He glanced at Jon. I return as a Stark, yes, but I bend the knee to my brother. We are united. Lady Mormont nodded briskly as though satisfied with that answer. Good. Because the North does not need more divisions. We have enough enemies out there. Lord Glover shifted. With two Starks side by side, I hope we might patch old wounds. King in the North Snow has forgiven us for our late arrival against the Boltons, but we remain ashamed. As for you, Lord Robb, many of us marched under your banner until you rode south. Robb forced himself not to bristle at the implied criticism. His ill-fated southern campaigns still haunted him, his marriage to Talisa or Jane Westerling in some accounts, the betrayal of Walder Frey, the mistakes that led to his downfall. I bear responsibility for the mistakes I made, he said softly. But we must look forward, not backward. Manderley rumbled, I forward to the storm of the dead. We've heard your warnings, King Snow, but we've not seen these White Walkers ourselves. Hard to unify men around a threat they can't see. Tormund snorted. You want to see them, Merman? I promise you don't. If you do, it's likely the last thing you'll see. Jon spoke up, tone grave. We stand at a crossroads. The worst winter in living memory is upon us and the dead grow stronger every day. The wall won't hold forever. If we can't convince the southern lords or Daenerys Targaryen to unite with us, we'll be alone when they come. Lady Mormont's eyes blazed. Then we fight alone if we must. The North remembers how to stand on its own. We can't stand alone against an army of the dead, Jon said firmly though not unkindly. We need allies. It's not about pride. It's about survival. At that a hush fell. Even the most stubborn lords shifted uneasily. The prospect of undead horrors was not something they relished. Ser Davos cleared his throat. We must also consider that the Lannisters might turn their attention north once they secure the south. They've already done enough damage with their manipulations. Jon nodded. Which is why I plan to journey south to meet with Queen Daenerys. She has armies, dragons, and a keen interest in overthrowing the Lannisters. If she can be convinced that the real war is to the north, we might stand a chance. Robb listened, arms folded. The question is how best to secure that alliance. If she sees a dragon at our side, she might be more inclined to believe our warnings about the White Walkers. Jon looked thoughtful. It's a risk to bring your dragon. We don't know how it will react in the presence of hers. But it may be the best show of good faith and a demonstration that House Stark is not without power. Robb hesitated, picturing the black-scaled beast perched outside the walls. I'll send it with you if it will come. But I'm not sure I can command it from afar. Our connection is strong, but not absolute. If it senses my need is here, it might not obey you. Jon gave a half-smile. Then perhaps you should come south with me. A ripple of surprise went through the lords. Even Tormund cocked an eyebrow. Robb exhaled, glancing around at the faces that looked to him for leadership. I can't leave the north so soon after returning, he said. And I told you I would help Sansa hold it together. If both of us leave, we risk instability. That's exactly what I was thinking before you arrived, Jon conceded. Now that you're here, maybe you're the one who should go south. You have the dragon's trust. You can speak with Daenerys Targaryen from a position of experience, resurrected by Dragonfire, you say. That might intrigue her more than a bastard from the north who was raised by the Night's Watch. Meanwhile, I stay here, shore up our defenses, keep the lords united. Robb paused, considering it. The truth was he had not expected this possibility. But it made sense. If the entire point was to show Daenerys that the North could be a valuable ally, an ally with a dragon of its own, Robb was the logical emissary. He thought of the many northern houses who might question Jon's absence again, but realized it could be just as problematic if Jon left. At least the lords were accustomed to Jon's leadership. Robb was a resurrected memory, a face from the past that might sow confusion if he stayed without Jon to anchor the new order. All right, Robb said at last. I'll do it. I'll go south and meet Daenerys Targaryen. I'll bring the dragon if it agrees to come. But I'll need a small retinue, men I can trust. Jon nodded, relief and worry mingling in his expression. Take whoever you need. Ser Davos can advise you if he's willing. He's traveled those roads and knows the ways of diplomacy better than most. He glanced at Davos, who gave a curt nod. I suggest you also bring a few lords to represent the North's interests and a few wildlings if you want to show we have them as well, though that might not sit easily with southern lords. Robb's thoughts swirled. He had marched south once before, an action that ended in tragedy. Now he was to do so again, but this time under the shadow of the undead with a dragon as companion and with no intention of fighting for the Iron Throne. Instead, he would be pleading for aid against an enemy that threatened all mankind. I'll do it, he repeated. Gods help us all. They spent the rest of the morning hammering out practical details. A raven was dispatched to Dragonstone, requesting a parley with Daenerys Targaryen in the name of House Stark. Jon penned the letter personally, sealing it with the direwolf sigil. Then, as midday arrived, a call went out for the black dragon to land in the courtyard so the castle folk could behold it up close. Robb stepped outside, raising an arm to shield his eyes from the white glare of sun on snow. Far overhead, he glimpsed the dark silhouette circling. He felt a twinge within him, a prickle along his spine. The beast sensed him. A roar rattled the sky. The dragon spiraled down, landing with surprising grace. It folded its wings, tail lashing the snow. Guards pressed back, and stable boys ran for cover, but Robb approached steadily. Jon and the lords watched from a safer distance. Even Tormund looked nervous. So you just talk to it? He asked warily. Robb placed a hand on the scaled flank, feeling its warmth. The dragon let out a growl that vibrated the air. Its eyes glowed like banked coals. Robb murmured quietly, words of reassurance, though he did not know if the dragon understood his speech or simply his tone. He felt the connection as a low, steady pulse in his mind. We ride south soon, he told it. Will you come with me? The dragon's mouth opened slightly, revealing rows of razor-sharp teeth. No flames emerged, but Robb smelled the faint whiff of sulfur. A sense of agreement, or at least curiosity, pulsed back at him. He turned to the watching crowd. Lady Mormont, fearless as ever, took a step forward. By the gods, she breathed. I've never seen such a creature. They're said to be extinct or only in the far south. Yet here it stands, as black as night. Jon turned to Robb. We'll make ready as soon as we hear back from Dragonstone. In the meantime, you'll need some gear. We can't have you in tattered leathers meeting the Queen of Dragons. Robb inclined his head. Aye. Though I doubt I'll ever match the finery of the south. He patted the dragon's side one more time. Come on, let's let it hunt if it needs to. Carefully, he backed away. The beast crouched, then launched itself skyward once more, stirring a blizzard of snow in its wake. A few days passed in tense anticipation. Ravens arrived from scattered houses, most offering tepid support but wary of more war. The castle bustled with activity, armory repairs, winter provisions counted and recounted, watchers assigned to every approach. Everyone sensed that another storm brewed, though whether it came from the White Walkers or from politics, none could say. At last, a raven returned from Dragonstone. The note was curt but non-hostile. Daenerys Targaryen would receive an envoy from Winterfell. She made no promise of alliance but expressed interest in meeting the rumored resurrected king in the north and his dragon. The message was signed by Tyrion Lannister, Hand of the Queen. Robb's eyebrows rose at that name. Tyrion Lannister. Ned spoke of him once as different from the rest of his family. I recall meeting him briefly at Winterfell in better times. He gave a plan for a saddle so Bran could ride even after his fall. But he's the Queen's hand now. Jon nodded. So it seems. The world has changed beyond all reckoning. That evening, in the quiet of a small solar, Robb and Jon sat alone by the fire. They drank a bit of mead, the flames casting their shadows on the stone walls. It was the first moment of real intimacy they'd shared since reuniting. They spoke in hushed tones about the gulf of years that separated them, the tragedies endured by their siblings, the burdens of leadership. Jon asked quietly, "Robb, do you remember anything from being dead?" His eyes flickered with sympathy. "I remember only darkness. A vast nothing. Sometimes I dream about it or about the moment I woke to find Melisandre chanting." Robb stared into the fire, letting its heat caress his face. "I remember the betrayal, the stabbing, the blood. And then, emptiness. Until I felt heat coursing through me, as if my bones were being forged anew. I thought I was trapped in some nightmare. When I opened my eyes, the dragon was there." He shuddered slightly at the memory. "There's a hunger inside me sometimes, a fire that feels both mine and not mine. I don't know if it's the dragon's presence or if it's what keeps me alive." Jon nodded. "It's a heavy burden. But you carry it well." Robb managed a weary grin. "Look who's speaking. Raised from the dead yourself, crowned king in the north, fighting white monsters. Our father would be proud of you, Jon." A flicker of sadness passed over Jon's face. "Our father, gods, how I wish he were here to guide us. To see what's become of us." His voice caught. "And you. You were always the rightful heir, the golden son. Now you stand here, something beyond mortal understanding, but you choose to kneel to me." Robb reached out, clasped Jon's forearm. "That's because I believe in you, brother. And because I've learned that crowns are heavy, often heavier than any man can be, Are alone." They talked late into the night until the fire burned low. Jon eventually departed to his own chamber and Robb lingered by the dying embers. He felt the pulse of that hidden fire in his veins, imagined it dancing with the flames before him. Outside, a fresh snowfall began, cloaking Winterfell in moonlit white. In the days that followed, preparations for the journey took shape. Ser Davos agreed to accompany Robb as an advisor, along with a handful of northern men, small in number but carefully chosen for skill and loyalty. Tormund declined, preferring not to entangle himself in Southron foolery, though he wished them luck. Lady Mormont offered a Bear Island warrior named Ragna, a tall, grim-faced woman who had little to say but bore a fierce reputation. Lord Glover contributed 2 men-at-arms. Osha surprised them by announcing that she and Rickon would also come. Robb initially balked at Rickon's involvement. "He's too young," he told Osha in private. "This will be dangerous." Osha set her jaw. "I promised your mother I'd keep him safe, but I also promised to stand by him. The Boltons took too much from the boy already. If the world is truly ending, maybe he deserves to see it with his own eyes, to learn. I can keep him from harm." Rickon, when pressed, was unyielding. "I want to be part of this," he insisted. "I'm a Stark. You said I could learn to help." Robb found himself outmaneuvered by the combination of Osha's determination and Rickon's fiery insistence. In the end, he relented. But he made Rickon swear to obey commands, to stay close, and not to risk himself recklessly. The boy agreed with the earnestness that only a child can muster. 2 days later, as dawn broke over Winterfell's snowy towers, Robb's small retinue gathered in the courtyard. The black dragon stood off to the side, wings half-furled, steaming breath curling in the air. Horses stamped nervously, hating the beast's proximity. Rickon's eyes were bright with excitement despite the cold. Ser Davos wore a heavy fur cloak and tested the weight of his sword. Ragna from Bear Island gave last instructions to the men-at-arms. Osha stood near Rickon, scanning the sky warily. Jon approached Robb and clasped his forearm. "Safe travels, brother," he said. "I wish I could go with you, but the North needs a Stark here." Robb nodded, heart heavy and hopeful all at once. "We'll return as soon as we can, with or without the Targaryen Queen's help. Let's pray it's with." They exchanged a quick embrace. Sansa stepped forward, her eyes glimmering with unspoken emotion. She placed a small token in Robb's hand, a direwolf carved from weirwood, no bigger than his thumb. "For luck," she whispered. He closed his fingers around it. "Thank you, Sansa. I'll keep it close." Then, lightly, he touched her cheek. "Take care of yourself and keep an eye on Jon. He needs your counsel." She nodded, tears threatening at the corners of her eyes. Then Robb turned to the dragon. "Shall we?" he murmured. He slipped a newly crafted harness over its neck and shoulders, a rough contraption of leather straps and iron buckles that the blacksmiths of Winterfell had fashioned. If Robb was going to fly, he needed some semblance of a seat. Most of his companions would ride on horseback, though they would not travel as quickly. Robb planned to scout by dragon, then land and join them on the road. It would still be faster than a purely mounted journey, but it would keep them from being separated. Osha, Rickon, Ser Davos, and the rest would follow along behind. Once they neared White Harbor, the idea was to secure a ship heading south. Sailing might be safer than riding through the war-torn lands, though they would have to coax the dragon aboard or have it fly overhead. Davos was uncertain how that might work, but they would figure it out as they went. With a final nod to his brother and sister, Robb mounted the dragon. The black scales shifted beneath him, a living, breathing seat of muscle and power. He felt the heat radiating through the harness. He took a breath, bracing himself. A hush fell across the courtyard as the beast spread its massive wings. Then, with a mighty thrust, it leapt skyward. Snow flurried around them, and the watchers below shaded their eyes as Robb and the dragon soared above Winterfell's walls, the winter sun glinting on dark scales. Though he had flown once before, the sensation still stole his breath. Icy wind whipped against his cheeks, and his heart pounded with exhilaration and fear. He clung to the harness, glancing down at the castle that shrank beneath him. The fields extended in all directions, pristine and white, dotted with the dark shapes of trees. His companions on horseback followed as best they could from below, trotting out of the gates into the wide northern expanse. Robb circled once, letting the dragon orient itself, then angled south. At first, they made good progress. The dragon's flight was swift, covering leagues in what felt like mere moments. Robb soared above roads he had once marched with an army. It pained him to recall how that had ended, but he forced himself to focus on the present. They were heading to forge an alliance that might save the realm. The dragon let out a roar, a clarion call that echoed across the open plains. The men and women on the road below would occasionally catch sight of it, sending small folk into panicked prayers or shouts of astonishment. Near midday, Robb landed by a stretch of forest to wait for the riders to catch up. He practiced controlling the dragon's descent, guiding it with gentle pressure on the harness. He found the beast surprisingly responsive to his shifts in weight and the faint mental tug he felt in its presence. It was still more guesswork than mastery, but each attempt revealed new aspects of their strange bond. As Osha, Rickon, and the others approached, Ser Davos had a haunted look. "Never thought I'd see the day when a Stark rode a dragon," he said, dismounting stiffly. "If you'd told me that back in my smuggler days, I'd have called you a liar." Robb managed a wry smile. "These are strange times indeed." They made camp that night in a sheltered grove. The temperature plummeted, and the wind howled through the pines. The dragon curled itself near the edge of the clearing, generating enough warmth that the horses eventually calmed around it. Rickon huddled in furs, wide-eyed at the creature's presence. Shaggy Dog, prowling nearby, growled softly but kept a respectful distance. Ser Davos set a watch rotation, though they doubted any bandits would be foolish enough to attack a camp with a dragon. In the stillness of night, Robb sat by the dying fire, the black dragon dozing a short distance away. Rickon dozed too, sprawled on a pile of blankets, Osha at his side. The men-at-arms slept in a rough ring, weapons close. Only Ragnar remained awake, standing silent guard with her spear. Robb gazed at the embers, remembering his dream of the undead. The flicker of flame reminded him of how easily it could be snuffed out by encroaching cold. He clenched his jaw. "I'll not fail this time. Whatever I must do to protect them, I'll do it." Their journey continued in this manner for days. Sometimes Robb flew ahead, scouting for safe paths or villages where they might rest. Occasionally, the weather turned vile with snow squalls, forcing them to huddle together until the winds eased. They passed lonely hamlets, found burned-out farms still bearing scars of the war. Small folk often scattered at the sight of the dragon overhead, but a few braver souls came forward, hungry for news. Robb offered what reassurance he could, though he felt the heaviness of his own uncertainty. At White Harbor, they found the gates well guarded. Lord Wyman Manderley was absent, gone to attend some matter in the western parts of his domain, but his castellan welcomed them after initial shock at the dragon perched on the outskirts. Getting the beast into the city was deemed impossible, so Robb left it to hunt along the coast while he negotiated passage on a ship. Ser Davos, once a smuggler of repute, took the lead in securing a suitable vessel. The plan was to sail to Dragonstone, the seat of Daenerys Targaryen, hopefully in time to catch her before she advanced further inland. "How do we bring the dragon across open water?" Rickon asked, leaning on the quay as he gazed at the ships bobbing in the harbor. "It can't rest on the deck. It's too big." Ser Davos rubbed his stubbled chin. "It may have to fly overhead. We'll sail, and it can follow along or lead the way. Once we reach Dragonstone, perhaps it can land on some crag or cliff if there's space. I can't see a simpler solution. Robb frowned, imagining storms at sea. Would the dragon be buffeted by winds? It might be safer than forcing it into a ship. Let's hope we don't encounter the royal fleet or Euron Greyjoy or the Lannisters at sea, he said. Still, we need to risk it. With the Castellans' reluctant blessing, they boarded a stout, wide-bellied ship named the Silver Otter. Its master, a wiry man called Bryn, seemed torn between abject terror of the dragon and the handsome payment in coin that Ser Davos offered. After ensuring supplies were loaded, they prepared to set sail at dawn. That night, White Harbor's taverns buzzed with rumors of the resurrected Wolf King and his black dragon. Some said it was an omen of doom, others that it was a sign of the old gods reawakening. Robb paid little mind to the whispers, more concerned with the logistics of the voyage. Osha and Rickon had never traveled by sea. The Bear Island warrior, Ragna, seemed stoic about it, though she asked a few blunt questions about how to repel pirates. Ser Davos assured her that the route to Dragonstone was not heavily plagued by reavers at the moment, but no one could guarantee absolute safety. In the pre-dawn gloom, with the city's towers still cloaked in gray mist, their party made ready to depart. The black dragon perched atop a rocky promontory, scanning the harbor. Robb coaxed it into flight with a subtle call and the intangible bond that lingered between them. It circled above as the Silver Otter's sails were unfurled, catching the cold wind off the sea. With a creak of timbers and a lurch beneath their feet, the ship glided from the dock. Robb stood at the bow, cloak wrapped tight, as White Harbor receded behind them. Rickon hung on the rail near Osha, eyes gleaming with excitement. Ragna and the men-at-arms maintained a vigilant watch while Ser Davos consulted with the ship's master about headings and currents. Overhead, the dragon soared, an ebony silhouette against the brightening sky, occasionally diving low to skim the waves. Seabirds scattered in alarm whenever it drew near. The sea air was bracing. Robb inhaled deeply, trying to quell the swirl of nerves in his gut. He had never been fond of sea travel, remembering the first time he had considered crossing the neck by boat, but never had. Now he was on open water, accompanied by a creature that belonged more to the sky than the sea. And beyond the horizon waited a Targaryen queen he had never met, whose father's shadow still loomed over the realm. The irony was not lost on him, a Stark once sworn to Robert Baratheon's cause, now seeking the aid of the Mad King's daughter. But the world had changed, and so must he. The crossing proved uneventful at first. The dragon glided overhead, sometimes drifting off to hunt. On one occasion, the crew gasped as it dove into the waves, emerging with a massive fish clutched in its jaws, water streaming off its scales. It perched on a rocky outcropping to devour its catch before rejoining them. Bryn the shipmaster observed all this with an expression of mingled awe and dread, likely wondering what gods he had angered to end up ferrying a man and his dragon. Each night, they anchored or found a small cove for shelter, mindful of storms. Ser Davos told stories of his past voyages, from the Stepstones to the Free Cities. Rickon listened wide-eyed, while Osha cast skeptical looks. Robb tried to keep track of the days, aware they must reach Dragonstone soon if they hoped to catch Daenerys before she marched inland. Rumor had it she intended to forge alliances quickly and then head for King's Landing. One morning, a dense fog enveloped them, reducing visibility to a handful of yards. The ship's crew grew tense, listening for any sign of dangerous reefs or approaching sails. Robb sensed the dragon nearby, though he could barely see its shape in the milky haze. Suddenly, a shout rang out from the rigging. Another ship had been spotted off the port bow. The shape that loomed from the mist was large, bearing no clear banners. Bryn cursed, ordering men to the ropes. Ser Davos and Ragnar readied themselves, uncertain if this newcomer was friend or foe. Osha gripped Rickon's arm. Gradually, the outline resolved into a weathered cog, sails slack in the still air. No immediate threat. A voice called across the water, "Who goes there?" Bryn responded in kind, identifying the Silver Otter as a merchant vessel out of White Harbor. After a tense exchange, it emerged that the other ship was a Lysine trader blown off course. They'd lost half their cargo in a recent storm, limping near these shores in search of safe harbor. Davos conferred briefly with them, exchanging news. They had heard of a Targaryen fleet anchored off Dragonstone. The Lysini captain warned of rumors that Euron Greyjoy prowled the seas, seeking to disrupt Daenerys' forces. That news pricked the hair on Robb's neck. Still, they pressed on. The fog lifted gradually, revealing the rolling swell of the sea once more. Another few days passed. Tension mounted as they neared Dragonstone's rocky coastline, a forbidding silhouette in the distance. The ancient Targaryen stronghold rose from the sea like the spine of some sleeping beast, dark, jagged towers shaped by Valyrian sorcery. Smoke or steam curled from the volcanic mountains at the island's heart. A war horn suddenly sounded across the water. Robb spotted galleys bearing the three-headed dragon banner of House Targaryen, arrayed in a defensive posture. The Silver Otter's crew moved about nervously, flapping signals to show they came in peace. Overhead, Robb's black dragon let out a challenging roar. The Targaryen warships did not attack, but kept a close formation. Ser Davos stood at Robb's side, voice low. "We're expected, at least. Let's hope that protects us from any trigger-happy captains." A smaller craft approached, bearing a Targaryen banner. A man in fine clothes shouted a greeting, demanding to know their purpose. Davos responded that they carried Robb Stark of Winterfell, come at Daenerys Targaryen's invitation. That name caused a stir among the Targaryen sailors. They exchanged wary looks at mention of a Stark, then parted ranks to allow the Silver Otter passage. As they sailed closer to the imposing fortress of Dragonstone, Robb's heart thumped. He could see black stone walls rising high above the surf, gargoyle-like dragon sculptures perched on ramparts. The place felt steeped in ancient power. The black dragon circling overhead let out another cry, as though announcing their arrival. On one of the castle's balconies, Robb glimpsed distant figures. Perhaps they were Targaryen soldiers or the Queen's advisors. He braced himself. The moment of truth was at hand. Once docked, they disembarked under careful supervision from Targaryen guards armed with spears and clad in black and red surcoats. Their leader, a stern woman with silver hair, demanded they surrender any weapons before being taken to see the Queen's hand. Robb, Davos, Ragna, and Osha all complied. Rickon, too, reluctantly gave up his small hunting knife. The men-at-arms stayed with the ship except for two who accompanied them as official escorts. Shaggy Dog was left behind on the deck, watched nervously by the crew. The Black Dragon, for its part, landed on a rocky outcrop near the fortress, hissing at any guard who came too close. They were led through winding corridors carved from black stone, lit by torches. The fortress was eerily beautiful, arched doorways shaped like dragon jaws, columns sculpted to look like coiled serpents. The air smelled of salt and sulfur. At last, they emerged into a large chamber with a high ceiling. A table shaped like Westeros dominated the center. Robb recalled tales of Aegon's painted table. Around it stood a cluster of people, Tyrion Lannister, easily recognizable by his short stature and mismatched eyes, Missandei of Noth, poised and calm, Grey Worm, the unsullied commander, expression unreadable, and, seated at the far end, Daenerys Targaryen herself. She was smaller than Robb expected, but there was a presence about her, an intensity in those violet eyes. Her silver-gold hair was braided into a regal crown, and she wore black and red garments that reminded him of dragon scales. A hush fell as Robb and his companions approached. Tyrion stepped forward first, giving a polite bow. "Robb Stark," he said, "former king in the north if rumors hold true. We welcome you to Dragonstone on behalf of Daenerys Targaryen, the breaker of chains, the mother of dragons, rightful heir to the Iron Throne. We are intrigued by your letter and your rather unusual traveling companion." Robb offered a respectful bow. "Lord Tyrion, it's been a long time since we met at Winterfell. Thank you for granting us an audience." Daenerys regarded him with a measured gaze, her posture regal. "I confess I was skeptical when I heard you had been killed at the Twins. Now you stand before me alive, accompanied by a dragon. You claim to be here on behalf of the North to seek my alliance. Speak." Robb straightened, meeting her eyes. "Your Grace, many say you are the last Targaryen. But we've both witnessed the impossible. I died yet rose again. You hatched dragons from petrified eggs. We live in an age of wonders and terrors. I come to ask for your help against the greatest terror of all, the White Walkers. An army of the undead marches south, and if we do not unite to stop it, our petty wars over a throne will mean nothing. The dead care not who sits it." Daenerys listened, her features cool. Tyrion's expression was thoughtful. Grey Worm stood impassively, hand on his spear. After a moment, the Queen spoke. "Jon Snow, your brother, has already sent word of these White Walkers. He sent ravens to me as well, but we have never laid eyes on them. And I have my own war to wage against Cersei Lannister. Convince me why I should focus on this threat first rather than seizing the Iron Throne. Robb inhaled, steel in his voice. Because if you win the throne while the White Walkers advance, you'll end up queen of a frozen graveyard. I marched south once before for a different war. I paid a heavy price for that. I have no love for the Lannisters, but the real enemy is not them. It's death incarnate, an endless horde that cannot be reasoned with. He allowed the flicker of his own pain to show. I lost everything once. I'd not see the realm lose everything to the cold. Tyrion exchanged a look with Daenerys. The tension in the room was palpable. Then Daenerys leaned back slightly. And this dragon you ride, how did you come by it? Dragons do not simply bond with anyone. They are children of fire and blood, my family's birthright. Robb refused to waver under her scrutiny. I cannot fully explain. I only know it was present when I woke from death. It's not an ordinary beast if such a thing exists among dragons. I suspect it was drawn to me by the same magic that resurrected me. I'm not here to challenge your claim to the Iron Throne, nor do I claim a Targaryen lineage. I am a Stark of the North. And I ride this dragon only by fate or chance. I will not pretend it belongs to me, but it has chosen to follow me, at least for now. Daenerys rose, her posture commanding. The world is full of stories, Stark. Some men come bearing truth, others bearing illusions. You speak of undead armies, as your brother did. You ride a dragon, yet you are not of my blood. I want to believe you, for the sake of the living. But I also know I cannot abandon my cause in King's Landing. My armies have risked much to place me on the throne. Will you bend the knee as your brother has, if I agree to help defend the North? Robb met her gaze without flinching. He recalled his vow to Jon, to support whatever was necessary to save the realm. He said, voice firm, I do not come as a king, your grace. I set aside that crown. If bending the knee spares the North from destruction, I'll do so gladly. But you must understand, your dragons alone can't save us from the White Walkers. We need dragonglass, we need men, we need unity. A flicker of surprise crossed Daenerys' face, perhaps at his directness, or at his willingness to bend so swiftly. Tyrion studied Robb thoughtfully, as though searching for deception. Grey Worm remained stoic, while Missandei seemed to watch Daenerys with an almost sisterly concern. Daenerys spoke again, more softly. Your brother, Jon Snow, has promised me he will not take arms against my claim if I aid him in the war to come. Now you echo the same. We have in our possession a large cache of dragonglass here on Dragonstone. I've allowed Jon Snow's men to begin mining it. Are you prepared to join that effort, to stand with me against the threats that face us both, Cersei Lannister and the White Walkers? Robb inclined his head. I am. As for the Lannisters, I have no love for them, but I can spare little thought for King's Landing when the dead march on my homeland. However, if your armies can help us stand against the Night King, then when that threat is done, I'll not stand in the way of your rightful war. A silence followed. Then Tyrion took a step closer. Your Grace, he said to Daenerys. This man's story is extraordinary, but we should consider the evidence. He arrived on a dragon, the same color as the one rumored to have awakened him from death. And we have consistent accounts from the North about his presence and the Bolton threat. Perhaps we should allow him to prove his loyalty, as his brother has. If the White Walkers are real, we'll need every ally we can muster. Daenerys' eyes flicked between Tyrion and Robb. At length she gave a curt nod. Very well, Robb Stark of Winterfell. We shall see what part you have to play in this war. You will remain here for now. Show me this dragon of yours. Let me witness its bond with you. If it proves docile, perhaps we can stage a demonstration of our combined might. I will not discount the chance that the Great War is indeed to the North. But do not forget, I am the rightful queen of the Seven Kingdoms, and I will not have another pretender to a crown even if you claim to have forsaken it. Robb bowed once more. I understand. Thank you, your grace. He felt Ser Davos exhale beside him, relieved that this had not ended in violence. Osha shifted her stance, still wary of the Targaryen guards. Rickon stared at Daenerys with open curiosity, while Ragna offered only a grunt of acknowledgement. Missandei stepped forward, graciously inviting them to settle in guest chambers for the time being. As they were escorted out, Tyrion lingered, favoring Robb with a pensive look. You were always said to be honorable if impulsive, the dwarf remarked. Let us hope your second life grants you caution as well as courage. You'll find Daenerys Targaryen is not easily swayed, but she is just, if convinced of a righteous cause. Robb let out a quiet breath. I hope she's as just as you say. Or we'll all burn together before the real battle even begins. Tyrion gave a sardonic half-smile and turned away. The sound of boots on black stone echoed through the corridor as Robb and his companions left the throne room. They were officially guests of the Dragon Queen now, though the sense of being prisoners in all but name weighed on them. Still, Robb told himself it was a victory of sorts. They'd made it here, presented their case, and not been turned away or slain. In these uncertain times, that was no small thing. They settled into the austere chambers provided under the watchful eyes of unsullied guards stationed at every corridor. The windows overlooked a turbulent sea, the waves crashing against Dragonstone's volcanic shore. The air smelled of salt and smoke. Rickon explored the room while Osha tested the door, confirming they were not locked in, at least not overtly. Ser Davos stood by the window, gazing down at the bobbing shape of the silver otter in the harbor. Ragna checked her few possessions, always ready for a quick departure if trouble brewed. Robb sat on a bench, running a hand through his hair. We've crossed half the world, or so it feels, he said quietly. And still, we stand on shifting ground. If Daenerys does not believe us, I fear we've wasted precious time. Ser Davos, turning from the window, offered a reassuring nod. She'll believe once she sees proof. You said the Black Dragon will come at your call. Perhaps a demonstration of your bond will sway her. Rickon piped up, could we show her the whites we captured? Or the bodies of the dead? Davos shook his head. We haven't any whites to parade before her. We did that once with the Southern Lords, but it's no easy thing to carry a white around. Robb sighed. We'll do what we must. If Daenerys Targaryen is truly the breaker of chains, then maybe she'll break the chains of disbelief that keep men from seeing the real threat. Night fell, ushered in by a howling coastal wind. Dragonstone's corridors took on a moody, flickering glow from torches that guttered in the drafts. Servants brought food, fish stew, black bread, and salted vegetables. Robb ate sparingly. He could feel the undercurrent of tension, the sense that each day counted, each hour drew them closer to the approaching winter storms. His mind wandered to Jon, to Sansa, to the men and women of the North who pinned their hopes on him to forge this alliance. Before he turned in for the night, he slipped outside onto a balcony that overlooked the fortress's courtyard. Waves of heat rose from distant fumaroles in the volcanic rock. Moonlight lit the sea. Far below, near the shore, a dark shape moved, his dragon pacing along the basalt stones, occasionally testing the water with a claw. Daenerys's own dragons were nowhere in sight, presumably roosting in some distant nook of the fortress or hunting across the sea. He wondered how they would react to each other. Would they fight or find some draconic kinship? A memory of the dream returned to him, of the undead horde surging relentlessly. Even with all the might of dragons, the long night threatened to swallow them. He closed his eyes, feeling the swirl of cold wind across his cheeks, imagining the heat that smoldered within him, a smaller echo of the dragon's flame. The realm needed them. He prayed to the old gods, the new, to Lawler, or any deity that might be listening, grant me the strength to save my home. Grant me the wisdom not to repeat my old mistakes. At dawn, a formal summons arrived from Queen Daenerys requesting that Robb Stark present his dragon in the courtyard for inspection. Robb's companions exchanged glances. Inspection? Osha repeated skeptically. Likely she wants to see if you can truly command it, Ser Davos said, shrugging. Or measure how dangerous it is. Robb set his jaw. Then let's not keep her waiting. They descended the winding staircases until they emerged into the broad courtyard of Dragonstone. Carved dragon motifs spiraled along the walls and braziers burned with flickering flames. Daenerys stood at the far side, flanked by Tyrion, Grey Worm, Missandei, and a handful of Dothraki warriors who looked entirely out of place in this gloomy fortress. Off to the side, two enormous dragons crouched, Drogon and Regal, Robb guessed by their coloring. Their eyes burned with primal ferocity, tails twitching restlessly. A hush fell as Robb stepped into the courtyard, Rickon, Osha, Ragna, and Davos trailing behind. The black dragon soared overhead, letting out a piercing cry that made the Targaryen beasts hiss. Daenerys raised an arm in caution, her silver hair lifting in the wind. Call your dragon down, Stark, she commanded. Robb exhaled, stepping forward. The black dragon circled once, then descended with a rush of air, landing hard enough to shake the ground. Its wings folded and it snorted steam, eyes flicking warily to the two Targaryen dragons. Drogon hissed back, baring fangs. For a moment, tension coiled thick. Daenerys watched closely, hand resting lightly on Drogon's side as if to soothe him. Robb approached his dragon, placing a hand on its scaled flank. He felt it tremble with contained aggression. The presence of other dragons stirred an instinct within it, territorial, perhaps. He pressed gently, urging calm. Slowly, the black dragon lowered its head. The Targaryen dragons tensed but made no immediate move to attack. Daenerys took a cautious step forward, motioning for Tyrion and the guards to remain back. She moved with confidence, as though assured of her own dragon's protection. Her eyes were locked on the black dragon's form, studying every scale, the line of its horns, the shape of its wings. Robb watched her approach, aware that his own heart pounded with a strange mixture of pride and trepidation. When she was within a few yards, Daenerys paused. A gentle rumble came from Drogon, as though urging caution. The black dragon's gaze flicked to her, then to Robb. He sensed a swirl of conflicting impulses. Carefully, Daenerys extended her hand, palm outward. "Beautiful creature," she murmured in a tone that almost seemed reverent. "You are not of my clutch, but you carry the same fire." She let out a breath, turning her gaze to Robb. "Its eyes are unlike any of mine." Robb nodded. "Its gaze has a darkness to it, a hue like molten obsidian. I've tried to glean its sex, but truth be told, I have no idea. We've not known each other long." Daenerys looked deeply intrigued. Dragons do not bend easily to new riders, especially not once bonded to another. Yet this one seems tied to you even though you do not share my blood. Perhaps the magic that resurrected you forged a new bond. Tyrion edged closer, curiosity burning in his mismatched eyes. "Your Grace, if this is truly another living dragon, then you hold not the only key to draconic power. There might be lessons here, or a threat." Robb drew himself up. "I come to be an ally, not a threat. The North does not covet the throne. We only seek to ensure our people survive the winter and the war that crawls from the far north." Daenerys studied him another moment, then lifted a hand, lightly resting it on one of the black dragon's spikes. It growled but did not lash out. Drogon shuffled nearer, causing the ground to quake under its bulk. The two great beasts regarded each other, a dance of steaming breath and half-bared fangs. Slowly, tension ebbed as though they recognized a shared kinship. Daenerys exhaled in relief. "They will not fight," she said softly. "Not today, at least." Robb stepped back, letting her have space with the dragon. Rickon watched with wide eyes, while Osha kept a protective hand on the boy's shoulder. Ser Davos breathed evenly, looking grateful that no blood had been spilled. Ragna stood, spear in hand, ready for any sign of trouble. After a long, charged silence, Daenerys turned to Robb. "You have proven that you do indeed command this dragon," she said. "That is no small feat, Stark. I have 3 of my own, but losing even one to the White Walkers could be catastrophic. If your dragon truly shares your life force, that might give us an edge. I am not fully convinced about this undead threat, but I believe you believe it." Her eyes flicked to Tyrion. "We must strategize further. Join me in the war room." Thus began a series of intense councils within the black walls of Dragonstone. Daenerys, Tyrion, Varys recently arrived with his trademark whispered secrets. Grey Worm, Missandei, and the Dothraki Khalasar leaders participated. Robb, Davos, and Osha represented the North, with Rickon listening quietly. They pored over maps, weighed the risk of diverting forces north versus pressing the attack against King's Landing. They discussed the best ways to mine and forge dragon glass weapons, how to position the dragons against the White Walkers, and the possibility of forging a truce with Cersei Lannister long enough to repel the undead. Skepticism still lingered among some of Daenerys's followers. Why risk everything for a threat few had witnessed? But Daenerys herself showed an increasing willingness to listen, tempered by the knowledge that time was short. She demanded that Robb send for his brother Jon so that both Starks could stand before her to confirm the plan. Robb insisted that Jon was needed in the north to hold it together and that any journey south might leave them vulnerable. The debates went on late into the night. Meanwhile, the black dragon roost among the cliffs, forging an uneasy coexistence with Daenerys's brood. Robb spent long hours with it, trying to refine their bond. He discovered that it understood some of his intentions, responding to certain vocal cues or touches on the harness. Yet it remained a fierce, independent creature. On one occasion, it clashed with Regal in midair, exchanging fiery snarls. Neither was seriously harmed, but it reminded everyone how volatile dragons could be. Days blurred as final decisions approached. At last, Daenerys convened one more council, this time in a smaller solar. The painted table was laid out before them. "I have decided," she said, her voice carrying the ring of authority. "We will attempt an armistice with Cersei Lannister to address the threat in the north. If the undead are as real and dangerous as you say, then the living must unify. I will bring my dragons to face the Night King if necessary. But know this, Robb Stark, I will not abandon my claim to the Iron Throne." Once the undead threat is ended, I will have the realm's fealty, including the north. Robb stood, meeting her gaze. Once the threat is ended, your grace, we will deal with matters of fealty. I pledge to bend the knee if you help us survive, and I stand by that. My brother Jon Snow, crowned king in the north by our people, did likewise. Though we've not always trusted Targaryens, you've shown a willingness to hear us. That is more than we've received from others. Daenerys nodded. Tyrion coughed discreetly. Then the matter stands. We propose a temporary ceasefire with Cersei, present proof of the undead, somehow, and rally all forces north to repel the invasion. The question is, how do we convince Cersei to listen? Varys spoke up, his voice smooth as silk. Cersei's motivations are driven by fear and power. If we present her with undeniable proof that threatens her rule, she may be forced to accept a truce. But be warned, she is cunning and cruel. She may agree to a ceasefire with every intention of betrayal. Daenerys's eyes hardened. Then we must proceed with caution. Still, if we do nothing, the realm may fall to these White Walkers. Robb felt a swell of relief, however tentative. He had come south to secure an alliance, and it seemed they were on the brink of forming one. Time is not on our side, he said. The longer we wait, the stronger the Night King grows. Daenerys lifted her chin. Then we move quickly. I will send envoys to King's Landing. In the meantime, we must gather dragon glass weapons and prepare to travel north if the parley with Cersei fails or if winter comes faster than expected. Robb Stark, you and your dragon will accompany my forces so that I may see your prowess in battle if it comes to that. He bowed. I stand ready. That evening, in the courtyard, he and Daenerys stood side by side, watching as her 3 dragons fed on a freshly caught whale. His black dragon perched on a higher ledge, observing with cautious interest. She spoke softly, so only Robb could hear. We are both children of families steeped in tradition and tragedy. The Iron Throne and the North have been at odds since Aegon's conquest. Yet here we stand, forging an alliance that might shape the future. Do you ever wonder why the gods chose you for this fate? Robb thought of the knives that ended his life, the Dragonfire that somehow reignited it, the emptiness he had felt in death. All the time, he confessed. But if fate brought me back to protect the North, I won't question it. I'll do what I must. Daenerys studied him, a flicker of respect in her eyes. Then let us hope fate is kind. My father was called the Mad King. I intend to be different, to break the wheel of tyranny. Perhaps your second chance is part of that. I only pray we are not too late. Robb nodded, his gaze drifting up to his dragon. The night sky spread overhead, stars glimmering like distant fires. In his mind's eye, he still saw the White Walkers lurking beyond the wall, an army of dead with icy blue eyes. He clenched his fists, remembering the vow he made to Jon. He would not fail again. Not while Dragonfire still burned in his veins. Though the path ahead was fraught with betrayal and uncertain alliances, Robb felt a spark of hope igniting once more. The living were gathering, and soon the clarion call would echo across the realm, stand together or die alone. If the North was to endure, if the realm was to survive, they would need every ounce of courage. And perhaps, if the gods were just, the tale of the resurrected wolf and the dragon queen would become a beacon in the long night that crept ever closer. With that thought, he turned from the courtyard, Daenerys at his side, the shapes of dragons looming overhead. Their wings beat against the wind, a thunderous promise of power. Tomorrow, the war councils would continue, the ravens would fly, and the great game would march onward. But for this moment, Robb Stark allowed himself a quiet breath of conviction, steeling his heart for the trials yet to come. For the dead would not wait, and neither would he. The North must stand or all would fall into endless winter.